The Hasselblad camera did not have a viewfinder. It was taken away because the viewfinder on a Hasselblad camera is on the top of the camera. You look down into it and you're seeing the image as if it came through the lens, which is on the front of the camera. So there's a mirror in the camera,
Yeah.
which points the image up towards the viewfinder. But because they were wearing their spacesuits, obviously, they couldn't get their head close enough to the viewfinder to use it, so he took it away. So you've got to get a camera and basically point your body where you want to take the photograph. The shutter button on a Hasselblad camera is on the front of the camera. It was enlarged to about 1 inch square because when you're wearing a spacesuit, you're wearing heavy-duty gardening gloves or the equivalent of heavy-duty gardening gloves because you can't wear a spacesuit without gloves. You've got these things,
So,
which are,
Marcus, let me ask you, supposedly Neil Armstrong had a camera mounted on his chest, correct?
yeah,
Could he look down and see the image he was supposedly photographing?
no, because the viewfinder didn't exist.
So there was no viewfinder. He had to just point this box and
Yeah,
press a button.
yeah, his camera was about here on his chest,
Right.
so he had to move his body to get the photograph he wanted.
He must have been an incredible photographer because the composition is an aesthetically beautiful composition. Everything's in perfect focus, and the
Yeah,
lighting can't be improved upon.
yeah. And it's not an automatic camera. You have to manually adjust the focus, manually adjust the aperture, manually adjust the shutter speed. There are various settings of the shutter speed,
Yeah.
various settings of the aperture, and various focus. And quite ridiculously, the Hasselblad cameras used on Apollo, they had a polarizing filter. Now, you can't use a polarizing filter, which you do to remove unwanted reflections.
Yeah.
You can't use a polarizing filter without a viewfinder. You don't know if you've removed the reflections you want removed.
And he
So,
had to do all this with these big gloves. He had to make these adjustments with so he couldn't see the image he was photographing from the camera. He had to make adjustments on the camera with these unwieldy gloves, and he had to somehow point it and then press the button to make sure he got the perfect pictures.
yeah,
The camera would need to be adjusted for each one of those photographs.
yeah, because that is the sequence of photographs. There are 7 of them there. There are actually 8 altogether. That's the sequence in which they were taken over a period of about 3 minutes, because that's what the Apollo Lunar Surface Journal says. But he's taken a photograph of Buzz Aldrin at the top of the ladder, got bored watching him, took a photograph of the rubbish bag underneath the lander, noticed there's no blast crater. So he'd had to have adjusted the camera, the settings, because you're photographing direct sunlight at that point. He then takes a
There's
photograph of his final, well, possibly one of the landing legs to make sure it wasn't broken. So if it had been broken, who knows what would have happened. Oh, then there's Buzz coming down the ladder a bit more. So he has to adjust his camera again.
Right. Okay.
And I say that's a ridiculous photograph. Ridiculous. Then he comes down the ladder a bit more. And on the right-hand side, you can see him at the bottom of the ladder. And you can then see in that picture where the sun is shining.
Marcus, can
Yeah,
I make one point quick just to throw in here? Because when we look at the actual film footage, when we look at the camera on the outside of the LEM as Buzz Aldrin's coming down, the whole thing is in darkness. Yet, how come we can
that's a
see
good,
this? Crazy.
yeah, it's a good point because you can see Buzz Aldrin and you can see Neil Armstrong coming down the ladder in the film or the video. He's hardly illuminated at all. He's just a sort of ghost-like figure. And yet these photographs, they're brilliantly illuminated.
Okay. And
They're
let me, for my
photographs.
listener, let me interrupt again. That was Robert Wagner, who's also a researcher and videographer, among other things. So, Marcus, let me go ask you to take one photo and walk us through the impossibilities of one photo. You pick your favorite photo and talk to us about your favorite photo.
Well, one photograph, this one we got on screen now. Buzz
Okay.
Aldrin, allegedly, assuming it's him, he's at the bottom of the ladder, and you could see how much shadow there is in the area.
Right.
He should be in total darkness.
Right.
On the moon, yes, the sunlight will be very bright. Yes, it will reflect off the lunar surface. It may well reflect that amount of light if you're using digital cameras, but they're not. They're using film cameras. We've already seen film cameras. If you're not familiar with a film camera, it has severe limitations on how it can take photographs.
Yeah.
And most photographers will know what those limitations are. And if they say, well, it's very dark there, I better have additional lighting, use a flash gun. That's the obvious
Okay.
thing.
Let me say one more thing too about the film. The temperatures are extreme on the moon, correct?
Correct.
Very, very extreme. In the shade, they're way below freezing, and the heat, it's up above, way below, above boiling. So what happens to the actual Kodak Ektachrome film with the emulsive backing in those temperatures? Was it protected from temperature? Was it protected from radiation?
No, it wasn't. There was no protection on the camera, but the film would have been protected by the camera insofar as it may not have had as much heat on it. Because don't forget, this is in a total vacuum, a hard vacuum.
Yeah,
We haven't covered vacuum yet.
right.
Vacuum is one of the key points. It was the key point when I heard about it. Now, relate the story of that as well, because it's an interesting addition. It was knowing about vacuum and its effect on photographic film that persuaded me that this whole Apollo landing story was complete fabrication, or as I sometimes declare it, a brilliantly executed propaganda exercise to demonstrate to the world, live on television, don't forget it was all being filmed, live on television, that American technology was superior to that of the Soviet Union. That was the purpose.
Okay.
That was what
Yeah.
it was all about. It was a political exercise. And I say, knowing what vacuum effects occurred with photographic film persuaded me finally, after probably 25 years of looking at the whole thing, persuaded me finally that it was a fraud, a fabrication, and a fiction. Apollo was not real. Apollo could not be real if what we're being shown really happened.
Well, then let
And
me
that,
ask you this. Okay, I want you to go into the vacuum, and then we'll get to Scott in a second. But we do know that the missions before the so-called landings that occurred did circumnavigate the moon, and they did take pictures of the lunar surface. So how did they manage the film on those missions?
that's a good point. We haven't really covered the whole vacuum problem, but yes, they did use an unmanned orbiter called the Lunar Orbiter, not to be confused with the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, which came in
Right.
2009. The Lunar Orbiter launched in 1966 to photograph potential landing sites for Apollo, and it was filmed using photographic film.
There it is
And
there.
you'll notice on the right-hand side, pressure shell. They were pressurized.
Oh,
And
so those unmanned flights had film that was protected from the effects of the vacuum because of the pressurization.
yes, it doesn't need much pressure, about 1 pound per square inch of pressure.
Okay,
Normal
gotcha.
atmospheric pressure is 14.7 pound per square inch.
Okay.
And it's pressurized with nitrogen. And you notice on that schematic Scott just showed, it said hexagon. The hexagon spy satellite, or the description of it by its camera creator, Phil Pressel, was what finally persuaded me that Apollo was fraud, fake.
Okay. So let me summarize. So the Hasselblad camera that the astronauts had taking these beautiful pictures had no pressurization. They had no radiation protection either, correct?
None at all. There was no pressurization on the Hasselblad cameras,
Okay.
nor the Mara film cameras that were also being operated at the same time.
Okay, great. So Marcus, let me stop you there for a second. Scott, let me
Okay.
ask you, I know you've done work on the flag, and I wonder if you want to talk a little bit about the appearance of the flag, or maybe one or other two photos that had really struck you and got your attention.
Well, if you were not on the lunar surface and you were wearing a suit like this particular suit for the lunar missions weighed 180 pounds, that with the PLSS. You wouldn't be able to go out and practice on Earth with this suit on for any period of time. You see pictures of them getting dressed and stuff like that. So obviously they made a suit for doing simulations so that they could wear the suit. It's much lighter. Okay, it doesn't need to have any of the equipment in there. All they need to do is have a little fan going in there to blow some air around in the thing. And if you're going to be wearing this suit for any period of time, you're not even going to do the gloves up or anything else like that, right? You're going to keep everything loose underneath the collar. You're going to have everything like that. And every chance you got, you're going to be flipping the visor up. You might need to have a cigarette because those guys chain smoke at the same time. So if you take a look at the picture and you realize that everything is being faked, Well, wouldn't they be fiddling around with these suits at the same time when they're not actually being taken a photograph of? So we just take this photograph here and you look up the collar and the ring's not done up. There's the red ring and there's the other part of the ring where it hooks onto the glove.
Okay. So you're saying there's a broken seal, basically.
It's not a broken seal. He didn't bother to do it up.
No, listen, let's get straight. Let's not come from the perspective of they were faking it and this is what they did. Let's come from the perspective of looking at pictures because we think they did it and what makes us question the pictures. So I look at that picture and I say, yeah, if I were in an environment like the moon with the crazy temperature swings and the vacuum, everything would have to be sealed. You'd have to be completely sealed within the
Absolutely
spacesuit.
100% sealed.
Right. And if there's a breach in that, basically you're dead, right?
Yeah.
Right.
I was going to also say, you mentioned they were smokers. How on earth could these guys, most of them heavy smokers, go on a journey for 7 days without a cigarette or any nicotine substitute? Because I looked that up a few years ago. There was not one nicotine substitute supplied to any of them, and they did not taper down in training. You could see in their training they have a whole pile of cigarettes, empty butts just all over the place in their clean room, in that room. So anyway, that's just another thing I'd like to throw out there. They would have not been able to function.
You can see this is an image. It says it's Aldrin's suit here. Here's how far the zipper does up. It stops short. That's as far as the zipper goes up. It doesn't seal off. There's where the zipper stops and there's not much coming up. Now, if people say, oh, there's an inner liner, that's what sealed it. And you'll see it in books and everything else, right? That Massimo, whatever his name is, they're doing that going, oh, everything is sealed to it. But the helmet seals to this ring, which is the outer white suit.
Right.
So if you had a suit on that was supposed to be a pressure suit and only came up to your neck, wouldn't your head just kind of pop out in the vacuum? Because the white part isn't sealed, because it's not sealed at the back and it's not sealed up here. They just use Velcro over it. It's only a practice suit.
See, for an ordinary person, this is getting to be too technical. Like they say, well, they made the suits worked. Make it simple for us.
To make it simple, this is the suit that's in the museum that said it's the official suit Buzz Aldrin wore on the lunar surface.
Okay.
Does that make it simple enough?
Then a person could not have survived in that suit on the lunar surface.
And they don't have another one out there. They don't have samples of practice suits. Only one they're showing. This is the official suit that he wore on the lunar surface, and they even put dust on it and everything else. And they did the same thing with Neil Armstrong's suit. Apparently, they've restored them back to their original condition. I just wanted to show you when I said I was looking for things on the lunar surface. Shouldn't be on the lunar surface. Well, right there, there's the original photograph, and it's only that big. It's a can.
So you found what looks to be like basically a beer can in a photograph of the lunar surface.
Yeah, it's right there.
Okay. Now let me say this though too. Did the suits offer radiation protection to the astronauts?
0.
Okay.
Yeah.
X-ray a suit. Just go X-ray of an Apollo suit. Google it, and it comes up. If you can take an X-ray and see right through it.
Okay. So they weren't protected from radiation. There was a vacuum problem because the seals weren't really sealing. And then their PLSS, the personal life support system, that was supposed to keep them cool when they were in way beyond boiling temperatures and also warm them up when they got into the way below freezing temperatures, correct?
They actually have many models of them designed that are in the different museums out there, and you can go and find pictures of them with all of the detail, right? But you see this little oxygen bottle in there, and compare that to Jacques Cousteau and see how long you can survive. You can go out for 8 hours, and he's got 3 tanks on for 45 minutes. And they got this little bottle and say, oh, it runs for 8 hours, and a little tiny battery, and oh, it runs for 8 hours.
How did they cool the suits or heat the suits?
They have different methods on there. They use water and let the heat absorb into the water, and then they just release it. That's all in the technical data that you read on the stuff, but you'll never see that happen because if you saw them in their videos, they'd be running around. There'd be a little bit of off gassing of
Yeah.
water coming off their suits when they're doing it. But if
Okay.
you happen to be on Earth when you're doing that, okay, you don't need to have the pressurization. I was going to show you in that suit that that inner liner they had in there was just kind of bulk to make it look like it's under pressure kind
All
of
right.
stuff.
So you had the flag up. I've been salivating because I want to look at this flag with you, Scott.
This one is from March to the moon, and they claim they put out higher resolutions of this particular photograph. So as I'm zooming in here, if this is taken on the lunar surface in a torr 10 to the minus 11 or 12 vacuum right there, anything above 70,000 feet and water is just going to boil off. Anything above 70,000 feet, it's just going to boil off. You don't have any clouds above that level or anything else, right? There's no moisture there. This particular photograph, you can actually see that in the white and even in the red here, when I zoom in, it's wet. You can see the wet spots. And that spot there is actually wet. And then the entire flag, as it's drying back, it was folded up and it was drying on the edges.
So it looks like the
Coming
blue, it's very clear that the blue, that there's moisture in that blue strip right there, like something that's, okay.
You can even see it when you zoom in even closer. You can see the different shading in there where the actual star is absorbing the moisture, but you can see it soaking wet. Then you realize that anybody in the United States, they're all a bunch of flag wavers. I mean, they're going to take a picture of their flag. It doesn't matter what it is, what it's revealing. You can even see the water spots up here as well.
Well, see, when you're not looking for it, Scott, you miss all this stuff. You don't even think, Marcus, I wouldn't even think to question those photographs. Or if I were to see that, I would say, yeah, they made it to the moon. Look at these coming down the ladder. It's amazing. The flag is up there. You don't really look beyond, I don't know if you want to call it the surface, but beyond what's presented. Everything is bathed in this glow of a different understanding.
Walk into
Yeah.
one of their museums with all of their space stuff in there, and this is on a wall. It's 12 foot high. Billions of people have seen it. NASA claims it's basically 1 billion people a year have seen these photographs. So for 50 years, 50 billion views, and nobody noticed it. And now we've got the emperor's new clothing syndrome.
What they did was very effective. They convinced us that with the technology that is far inferior to an ordinary cheap cell phone that I can buy, they were able to do the logistics to get there. They were able to protect the astronauts from radiation. They were able to create beautiful pictures, and the film was able to survive all the extremes of radiation and temperature. And then they were able to run around on the go-kart and also to play golf while they were at it because it was such an easy environment to frolic upon.
Yes, but the moon is not a place you should frolic about. The moon
Right.
is a dangerous place for humans. For humans, not for unmanned craft. There's a difference.
Right.
We're very delicate little creatures, us humans. We need to live in very controlled conditions.
I'll send a link to a video I just watched that came out just on another channel a couple of days ago. I just saw it and watched it, and they were talking about how flawed the moon is on this stuff. And it's not that they're claiming that man didn't land on the moon on this thing. It's pointing out the difference of the radiation, the dust, and the temperature on the lunar surface. Dust, like as far as humans goes, is highly carcinogenic in there, just in its form. And of course, when I talk about the moon being irradiated from its inception from the sun, everybody else goes, oh, there's nothing there. Well, when radiation reacts with radiation all the time, I mean, I've read many documents on the fact that if you get close to the lunar surface, there was even 20, 30, 40, 60, 70 years ago, before the lunar landing, articles out there saying that if anybody would to stand on the lunar surface, their legs would be cooked right off of them. This already irradiation creates X-rays and microwaves as a byproduct.
And what I would say too, Scott, isn't there the issue of the micrometeorites? What we know of it is so pure, dusty and smooth, and that if a micrometeorite would have penetrated one of the suits, that would have led to the death of the astronaut, for example.
Yeah.
Everything is deadly there.
Everything's deadly. Let me kind of move us towards a conclusion in the next 20, 30 minutes and ask each of you, what if you could pick one thing that you would communicate to others to question about the legitimacy of the so-called moon landings, what would it be? And let me begin by, I'm going to offer my own. You know, I'm not an astronaut, I'm not a physicist, whatever. I've devoted my life to psychoanalysis and whatnot. And I remember I've seen the press conference of the conquering heroes when they returned from the greatest human achievement in recorded history. And I have to say, it is a very jarring experience. And people who have watched that will understand that. And I know you've watched that many times.
Yeah.
These look like three sheepish schoolboys who took a smoke behind the barn and were hauled out in front of the headmaster. They should have been crowned with laurels with a parade like in the Roman times or whatever. And instead, you'd think somebody told them that their mother just died in that press conference. It's an astonishing psycho. See, that to me, it's psychologically so unreal in a situation like that. I can't prove anything with it with that psychology. It's a soft science, but it makes no sense. When you've conquered the most forbidding environment, you've done the greatest thing in human history, you should puff your chest out and smile a little bit. I didn't see one smile in that entire conference.
Yeah.
They quit NASA.
Yeah, that's
Neil
right.
Armstrong was gone. You have
Yep.
the most iconic person in the world. Couldn't you convince him to continue to work for NASA?
Yeah.
All of these products that so-called got them to the moon and back. If you read the PDF files, they had this little half-inch insulation to wrap around the fuel tanks and stuff like that to protect them. In the articles, they would say, like, you could leave this tank there for 10 years, keep something frozen at minus 200 degrees Celsius, and leave it for 10 years at room temperature, and it would only change by 1 degree inside the thing. That's how good the insulation is. Why don't we have this material in our houses?
Well, Scott, let me ask you this question.
Wouldn't it-
Despite every administration in the United States coming in, why have we not gone back, quote unquote, to the moon? Since all those jaunts, it seemed like every other day, every other week, there was a new mission, another launch, another moon landing, another whatever. Why has it been so difficult to get back to the moon? That's the question.
It just never went there in the first place.
Yeah. And our technology is infinitely better than the technology then, correct? I think we all agree with that.
Yeah.
Communications, everything about it, right?
Yeah.
So, Marcus, let me go to you. Give me a single thing to focus in on that we should question, and that indicates your position.
Right. Probably the one thing which persuaded me, anyway, was the effect of vacuum on various materials.
Okay.
Vacuum has two effects. It causes liquids to outgas. That's the boiling that you see in water. That's outgassing. The lighter elements in the material just get out because there isn't any pressure to keep them in. When you climb Mount Everest, well, I haven't climbed it, but when people climb Mount Everest, the 1,000 feet before they reach the summit is called the death zone. Because if humans go to that point, that's only 5 miles above the Earth's surface. If they go to that point and they're not protected and they don't know how to deal with the environment they're about to enter, they will die. That's why it's called the death zone. And there are 300 bodies scattered around Everest of people who've succumbed to it.
Okay. But how does vacuum affect the missions? I mean, people say, well, they're in the spacecraft is pressurized. They get out, they have the pressurized spacesuits. Tell me about the vacuum.
Okay, the vacuum, when you're in a spacecraft, you're in a pressurized environment. You have to be. Outside the spacecraft, you're subjected to the hard vacuum of space.
Right.
And on the moon, it's a very hard vacuum indeed. It's measured in a unit called torr. It's torr 10 to the minus 12, according to NASA's documents. So you've got this hard vacuum. You can't protect metals because metals will outgas as well. It's called cold welding. You put two metals together, the atoms between them are being outgassed and they will intermingle and it will cause the metals to weld together. It's a well-known activity. It's used in industry. It's called cold welding. You can weld titanium and aluminium, for instance, or copper and iron. All metals will cold weld, but you have to have protection. And the point is that NASA did not provide protection against cold welding. So you've got these doors being opened on the landers. Unless the door is protected from the point it closes onto, it'll cold weld, so you won't be able to open it.
Because I was going to say to you, well, they sent out the James Webb Telescope. They have spacecraft. They're in a vacuum, and nothing happens to the structure of the spacecraft in a vacuum.
Well, there are things you can do. I visited a satellite manufacturing company, and I asked them exactly that. I said,
Yeah.
how do you protect against the radiation? How do you protect against the vacuum?
Yeah.
They said, oh, it's simple. We build the protection in. Now, Teflon, the non-stick stuff you attach to your saucepans, Teflon, if metals are coated with it, that can prevent cold welding. So
Okay.
there are ways to deal with it. And it's always said that Teflon was invented during the Apollo program. It's probably for that purpose. There are other forms of protection you can get. But the point is that any form of lubrication on any equipment will not survive. It will be evaporated. It will disappear into the vacuum. So you have to provide the protection. Now, I've actually written to NASA about the radiation protection because I had a contact in Hamilton Standard, the company that makes the spacesuits. And I asked them, I said, what protection did you put into the spacesuits to ensure the astronauts could survive the radiation in space? And they said, we built them according to the specification issued by NASA. You should address your question to NASA. So I did.
Yeah.
I'm still waiting for the reply. It's one of those questions NASA will not address.
And the other issue that the vacuum would have pertinence to is the film itself. The emulsion on the film would have been destroyed by the vacuum, given that there was no protection for that film.
Yeah. Well, Robert and Scott did the experiment. Robert bought a vacuum chamber, which only had a relatively low level of vacuum inside it.
Yeah.
And we took a photographic film, this stuff, we put it inside the vacuum chamber, allowed the vacuum to exist for about 24 hours, which is the length of time Apollo 17 was on the lunar surface over their 3 EVAs, moonwalks, put it into a camera and took photographs with it. And the photographs were okay, but the color balance on the films were completely shot. The greens weren't green, the blues weren't blue, the reds weren't red. They were different colors. So the film had been affected by a relatively low level of vacuum.
A minor degree of vacuum in that experiment. Yeah.
Somebody who watched the film that we made about that contacted us and said, I deal with vacuum professionally. I test equipment in vacuum. What you say is correct. I can prove it. And he did the same experiment using a photographic film. Similar to that was used on Apollo. I mean, the story about the photographic film is interesting in itself. It's claimed to be a special film. The only thing special about the film used on Apollo, or allegedly used, was the plastic backing was made relatively thin so they could get more into the camera, because the Hasselblad camera has a limited capacity in its magazines. They're mounted on the back of the camera. So they made the plastic backing thin in order to get more films into it so they could take more pictures, which they did. But that's the only change they made to the photographic film.
Okay.
There are claims that, oh, NASA used specially made film for space. Nobody's ever seen it. It's one of those stories. There are so many stories that NASA comes up with, or their supporters come up with, which try to explain the anomalies.
All right. Well, let's go. Scott, what about you? What would you point to as the single most important feature or fact about? Now, I say this since even an amateur like myself has been looking into it. There are at least 1,000 inexplicable anomalies that a piker like myself could see.
The wet flag is about as solid as evidence as you can get, as far as photographic evidence, and as well as Buzz Aldrin in the door frame there. To further that, I put this picture up here for the particular reason that it encompasses everything from the first person who questioned the moon landing, which is Bill Kaysing, because he said there was no blast crater. This is a composite. This is put together by Ian Reagan from the journal site, which he is all over the fact that they are preserving on the journal site. They're preserving the story of Apollo.
Now, when you say it's a composite, is this an actual photograph
This is a composite of several photographs from Apollo 11, with the exception of the fact that they threw the sun in. The sun itself, Ian doesn't understand anything about space. I mean, he works for the journal site.
This is not an official photo. This is not a legitimate photo.
This is from official photographs from an official person working for NASA, put together a composite out of the sun, because there are no photographs anywhere in the Apollo 11 photos that have a shot of the sun like that.
So what's the purpose of his making a photo look like this?
For the journal site, they can just play around with anything they want. He thinks it's a beautiful thing to encompass the entire thing to get some kind of extra ambiance or whatever. You're looking at that sun, and what do you see? You see a diffusion of light. And how do you get a diffusion of light? Through Earth's atmosphere. They don't even know when they're putting together a composite. This is my point. We see stars at nighttime. So there's less diffusion of light through the atmosphere at nighttime, so the stars are much more focused. Right. In daylight, when the sun is shining, you see this glow like you see here. In space, there's no atmosphere, so it should be a point of light. And they're showing a diffusion of light. This is how little attention they pay to the details that we look at.